Jesus does not want us to be torn apart with anxiety. I've got to ask you rhetorically, does anybody in here today struggle with worry? Does anybody struggle with anxiety? Jesus gives us a command we must heed. Look with me specifically at the beginning of verse 25. Therefore, I tell you, do not be anxious about your life, what you will eat, what you will drink, nor about your body, what you will put on. And Jesus reiterates this for us in Matthew 6:31, again in chapter 6 and verse 34. And the Greek word that's translated for anxious in the Matthew 6 passage is merimnao, which means I divide, I pull apart, I tear asunder. And the word prohibits that kind of distraction that pulls us apart. It makes us walking civil wars. It doesn't put the gavel in any one hand in the parliament of our personality. And Jesus does not want us to be torn apart with anxiety. I've got to ask you rhetorically, does anybody in here today struggle with worry? Does anybody struggle with anxiety? Jesus does not prohibit forethought. He does prohibit foreboding. Jesus does not prohibit careful preparation, but he does prohibit distracting concern. So Jesus gives us this command that we must heed. What's the command? Don't be anxious. Don't worry. Here's point number 2. Jesus explains an argument that we must understand. He gives an argument that we must understand. Look at the next part of verse 25. Is not life more than food and the body more than clothing? There's something you'll notice about Jesus in the way that he teaches. He loves to teach from the higher to the lower, from the greater to the lesser, from the heavier to the lighter. And is your life and the body that supports it not more than what you put in it and what you put on it? So I want to give a greater picture view of life and then a lesser day-to-day view of life. So let's look at the macro and then the micro for a moment. Firstly, greater, a picture, the big picture view of life. Jesus communicates that anxiety didn't give you life or the ability to support it. It just didn't. Think about life's emanation, the way that you came into this world. When you were merely a cluster of cells beneath your mother's heart at your most fragile state, anxiety did not contribute to the emanation of your life. It's not like you're within the womb and then all of a sudden you're like, okay, I got to worry so I can grow. It just doesn't happen. That's life's emanation. Think about life's termination. Job 14:5 says, since his days are determined and the number of his months is with you, and you have appointed his limits that he cannot pass. So whether slumbering peacefully at a ripe old age or unexpectedly passing in younger years from a tragic accident, worry is not going to forestall that day. God already has it picked out what day you're going to pass. So don't worry about it. So that's life's emanation, that's life's termination. God gave you the life and the body to sustain that life. But that's the greater, a bigger picture of life. Think about the lesser, a day-to-day view of life. Just day to day. I mean, most of you will go back to work or school tomorrow as it's a Monday. And as you go back to work or school or whatever you do, I want you to think about the need to not worry when you go back to the normal weekday. Since the creation of the world, not one time has spring ever failed to come. It's always come. He gave the greater gift of the world and the lesser gift of spring. God gave the greater gift of your eye and the lesser gift of light so you could see things. He gave the greater gift of your ear and the lesser gift of sound so you could hear things. God gave the greater gift of freedom from bondage in Egypt, that great overarching gift, and it came with some lesser gifts, manna that came from the sky. the quail that came, the rock that was smitten where water flowed. God's great gifts always include his lesser gifts. That's a really nice thing. If God's given you a physical life and the body that supports it, his great gifts include the lesser gifts all the days that he has you here. And you've heard me say this before, and I'll say this again. God doesn't do things halfway. We don't worship a halfway God. And so since he's not a halfway God, I've never seen a mountain and then thought, well, God only made half a mountain. I've never looked at a tree and thought, look, there's half a tree that God created. I wish he would have created the other half of the tree. God's great gifts always include his lesser ones. Romans 8:32, it says, he who did not spare his own son, but gave him up for us all, how will he not also with him graciously give us all things? So God has already given the great gift. He did not spare his son. He gave that gift, the greatest gift that could ever be given.